Hi guys, hope you're doing well today. I'm going to talk today about Chapter 1 in your Real Estate Practices and Procedure book. So it is the introduction to all of the different types of real estate businesses that one can enter into. When most people think about becoming educated in the real estate field, they automatically think about being a broker or a real estate agent, and that may or may not be your main goal here. But there are a lot of other areas that you can focus your career on that are associated with real estate, and by getting education in all of these classes, there's a lot of opportunities. So I wanted to go through those with you, and the tests, the state tests will touch on a little bit of this, but most of this is just for your own education as it relates to the different types of fields that you can go into. So let's talk first about brokerage, which is probably the number one reason most of you are here in this class. So a broker is basically just bringing people together for a transaction. In Ohio, of course, you have to be licensed as a broker to act in that excuse me, to act in that sorry. Sorry. Not a great way to start out, huh? Sorry. Okay. So in Ohio, you have to be licensed to be a broker, and you first have to be licensed as a salesperson. And there are a number of qualifications you have to fulfill as a salesperson before you can become a broker, and we'll talk about that at some later point in one of our upcoming classes. But basically, a real estate broker acts as a point of contact between two or more people in negotiating the sale or purchase or lease of real property, and that real property is owned by somebody else, and the broker is paid a fee for doing that. We'll again go into a lot more detail in one of the other chapters about all of those requirements. And then a salesperson is also a licensed person that has passed the state test and sat in on all of these classes first. And I have no idea, I got a tickle in my throat. Anyway, they act usually as an independent contractor, a 1099 person. They're associated with a broker or sponsored by the broker, not an employee. And they act on behalf of and with some supervision from the broker. So again, you have to be a salesperson before you can be a actual broker. But we'll get into all of the requirements for what it takes to be a salesperson and a broker in a later chapter. The next area I want to talk about is appraisal. As you probably know, whenever you're involved with a lender, getting financing to buy a house or to buy a shopping center or to buy an office building, the lender is always going to require an appraisal, which means basically that that individual is going to go out and do a thorough examination of the interior and exterior of the property. They should be familiar with the general area. They have to understand the dynamics of the economy as it relates to that area, what's happening in industry, are there any companies closing, any companies coming into town. They have to understand the demographics of the neighborhood. All of those keys, or all of those factors are key in determining the actual value of a property. One of the main things to remember about an appraisal is it is only good for one day, and it's the day that the appraiser actually dates his report, because all of those factors we just talked about can change from day to day. We've got a whole chapter, I think it's chapter, I'm not sure now, I know, but we do have a whole chapter on appraisal where we'll go into a lot more detail on that. People who buy property that are not involved with lenders should probably also get an appraisal done to make sure that what they're purchasing is valued by the general public at a price equal to or more than what they're paying for it. Many investors, though, will not will pay cash and will not have an appraisal done, and that's just because they're usually buying lower priced properties. They've done this a number of times, and they have a general idea as far as what the value of the property is. But if you have a client who's doesn't do this for a living but happens to have cash and is buying a $225,000 home, I would highly recommend, if that were my client, that they go ahead and have an appraisal done to make sure that they're not overpaying for the house. Okay, and in Ohio, appraisers, and again, we'll get into much more detail about this, appraisers do not have to generically or generally be licensed, but practically they have to be licensed if they really want to get business. If you're going to be involved in the appraisal of any federally insured loan, you have to be licensed. And most loans out there are somehow associated with being federally insured or guaranteed. And a lot of mortgage loans and banks and lenders will not allow appraisers to work for them unless they are licensed. But technically, in Ohio, you do not need to be licensed to be an appraiser. Next, let's talk about property management. There's a lot of business out there, and a lot of money to be made in property management, and a great need for property managers. Property managers can manage apartment buildings, apartment complexes. They can manage shopping centers. They can manage 2 families and 4 families. If an individual, say, is over their lifetime bought 5, 6 different duplexes or fourplexes as investment property, and then perhaps retire and go to Florida, they need somebody here to help them do things like as simple as collect rent, take calls from tenants when there's a water leak, make sure that the snow is removed. Those are very simple things. On the higher end things where you have apartment complexes or in my case like shopping centers, the property managers do everything from fixing water leaks, doing all of the actual property maintenance, or they engage third-party contractors to do that. They take care of the landscaping, the snow removal. They take applications for new tenants. They lease out the new spaces that are vacant. They collect rent. They also prepare budgets for the operating expenses and as well as for the income that's coming in. And their main duty is to perform the operations for the property as directed by the owner of the property, and to make sure that there's a profit that's made there. So again, property managers in Ohio need to be licensed. You can be a licensed salesperson, but again, you need to be associated with a licensed broker to act in that capacity. And others are just licensed brokers. A lot of money to be made there, and a lot of opportunity. So next, let's talk about financing. Financing is just any lender who would be involved in providing any type of monies to help the individual purchase the real property, whether it's your Fifth Third Bank or Bank of America or Quicken Loans to buy a house for $200,000, or it's large investment funds or debt funds out there that assist in shopping center owners buying shopping centers. As an example, I'm purchasing, not me, I wish I was, but my company is purchasing a shopping center near Omaha, Nebraska for $69 million, and we are getting a loan. We're putting 30% equity in and getting a loan for the other 70%. So there's a lot of work involved in with that finance company, or I'm sorry, it's not a finance company. It's a debt fund providing the financing. They do a lot of their own due diligence. They do their own investigation. They run the numbers. They look at the environmental report. They look at the property condition report. So there's a lot of due diligence that's done, and then there's the negotiation of the loan documents. So there's a lot of opportunity again out there in the finance area as it relates to real estate, and it really is a very specified expertise, because there's a lot of banks out there that loan on a lot of different properties, but it's even broken down so far as departments of a finance company that only deal in providing loans to shopping centers. It gets to be that detailed, and so again, lots of opportunities. Subdivision and development. So subdivision is where you take like a 100-acre farm, you buy that up, and then you break it down into different parcels, smaller parcels, and you sell those off. Sometimes the subdivision involves bringing in the utilities to the separate parcels, and sometimes it just involves separating the parcels themselves and selling them off. The development takes it a little bit further. The development is where perhaps a residential builder will buy a 100-acre farm and cut it up into half-acre lots, and then and create some green area and create streets and maybe even a rec center, and then they'll build that out and sell the parcels separately. So that's an interesting field. We do, personally, again, at my day job, we do a lot of that as well. We buy properties and create developments. It's very complicated, but very challenging, but every day is different, and you can develop a real expertise there as well. And again, something like that, you can work for a smaller builder or developer, whether they're in residential or commercial property, and you don't necessarily have to be licensed. You just would work and support them in one of those capacities. Next, let's talk about home inspections. And it's not just home inspections, it's also inspectors of anybody who looks at property and does due diligence for either a buyer or a lender in connection with purchasing some real property. In Ohio, home inspectors currently do not have to be licensed. There's all kinds of certifications and licenses available in Ohio, but no standards and no requirements at all. So in reality, if you're pretty mechanically inclined, you can put up your shingle on your door and create a web page and start advertising to be a home inspector. I don't think that's going to last long. There's been a lot of movement and some bills right now in the Ohio Assembly to create a law that says that home inspectors have to be certified and licensed. And personally, I think that's a good idea. You never really know. There's a lot of different home inspectors out there, and buying a home is usually the most expensive item anybody will ever buy. And it seems to me that you should be able to know that the home inspector that you're engaging is licensed in accordance with certain standards, to make sure that they at least report minimal types of things. Because a lot of homeowners have never owned a house before, or new homeowners, and they don't really even know what questions to ask. So personally, again, I think it's a good thing. But for the record, right now, home inspectors do not have to be licensed in Ohio. Other states, many states, they do have to be licensed. But we also, in the shopping center world, hire inspectors. We hire a roof inspector every time we buy a property. They actually get up on the roof and spend hours up there and do a complete report, of anything they see. They take lots of pictures. They tell us what they think the remaining life of the roof is going to be, and what the cost of it to replace it would be. We also have, we engage somebody to perform a property condition report. And again, these people go out to the shopping centers and they do a complete review of the property from the top to the bottom. And they act a lot like a house inspector. They'll look at all the plumbing, the electrical, they'll look generally at the roof, they'll look at the HVAC, they give us remaining life on all of those items. So again, lots of opportunities for inspection of real properties as it relates to either residential or in the commercial world. Counseling is another section or another area that you can think about going into with a real estate background or real estate education. However, most counselors, I'd like to call them consultants, are more experienced people coming from one of the prior things we talked about, whether they were a prior broker or an appraiser or in the finance world. And they usually tend to do it when they're ready to, retire and not work for somebody else, and they just open up a little consulting business and advise new people, or I guess I should say other people who are investors, whether it's in residential property, but usually commercial property, and making an investment in property. And then, of course, there's the area of education that you can go into. So you can be a teacher like me, right? Anyway, the education relates not just to students for licensing purposes like you. It also relates to providing education for the experts out there. Once you become an agent, you're going to have to comply with getting a certain number of continuing education classes every 3 years. And sorry about that. And so there's a lot of classes that are offered out there for CE classes. And some of them are more boring, like this one, and relate to maybe law or fair housing or ethics. But there's also a lot of CE courses out there that are a little bit more fun. A lot of them on home inspection, on how to stage a property. I think even getting your conceal and carry is a CE option that you have that you can use to comply with. So lots of education opportunities out there, not just for the everyday consumer student, but also for the experts. And the only other thing that I can think of, and the book hasn't really mentioned it, is deals with title exams and working for a title company. I think it's a kind of interesting to do that, but I'm kind of a nerdy lawyer, so maybe most people wouldn't like that. It's very detail oriented, and you'd be performing title exams and looking at all the prior records and, letting people know whether, there are any claims against the property, any liens, any easements, and then you'd be preparing reports and also dealing with people at closing, preparing the closing statements, and handling closing matters. So as you can see, there's lots and lots of different areas in the real estate world that one can focus their career in. And you don't have to always be focused in the same area as well. You can move around to all the different areas. So that's it for now for this section. See you soon.